I want to simplify trauma. Anything that is too much for me to handle at any given point of time translates as trauma for my brain, right? So as a 3-year-old child, let's say if I saw my parents fighting, now as a 30-year-old, I can comprehend my parents fighting and I can analyze and say, okay, it's okay, they fight. But as a 3-year-old child, it was too much for my brain to process information, seeing my mother and father in a conflict. That starts translating as trauma, and somewhere I get programmed to think negative about relationships because I start perceiving relationships from that mindset where I start believing that all relationships are meant to be full of conflict. And that becomes like an unprocessed energy in my subconscious. And throughout my life then, I'm constantly thinking fearful thoughts about relationships. And that's like an automatic loop that's happening to us. And we're not even aware that this is going on underneath the iceberg.
Okay. So now if I have to understand, so everything, like anytime a negative thought shows up, is it a good idea to look at what is our underlying belief as such?
Any negative thought that comes up in your mind is an indicator or a trigger, right? Because I like to use this trigger. Our triggers are our treasures. Everything that's a trigger as a negative thought is an indication for me to go within and do some self-work. To go within my subconscious to recognize that there's something unprocessed from the past that I need to actually work on. So our mind is exactly like a computer, and it needs to run on a memory, our subconscious mind, okay, for our everyday tasks. So there is no way we could do with our negative thoughts. Like Buckminster Fuller's one of the most famous quotes that says, you cannot destroy an existing reality. However, you can create a bigger reality next to it so that the existing reality becomes obsolete. So let's say if I have a negative thought, I cannot destroy energy because energy cannot be created, not destroyed. So I cannot destroy that thought. However, the only power I have is to build up a positive thought next to it that is bigger and that over amplifies or rewrites the negative thought.
Is that why you recommend people to do affirmations? Affirmations
and reprogramming suggestions, because people normally, you know what, see the thing about energy is energy flows where focus goes. Now if I have a negative thought and I'm trying to destroy that thought, first thing is energy cannot be created, not destroyed. But for me to even destroy that thought or to think of that thought not being there, I have to focus on it.
Right.
And every time I'm focusing on the negative thought, it's getting bigger.
That's why people say don't use negative words when you're thinking, right? Like
yes.
I don't want to fall ill. Rather say I want to be healthy, for example.
Absolutely. So what I recommend is don't worry about the negative thoughts. Let them be there. Allow them to be there because your mind is just thinking and you are not your thought. You are an infinite being who's having those thoughts. When you train yourself to detach yourself from the thoughts and become the observer, that is where the magic happens, because now you know you have a choice to think another thought. And you don't become a victim to your negative thinking. But mostly what people do is they think a thought and they become the thought, right? And then the thought generates certain chemicals that become your feelings, and now your thoughts and your feelings are generating your vibrations, and now your reality is coming back in the same form, and then again you're thinking the same thought and the same feeling, so you're caught up in a loop.
Yeah.
I highly recommend creating some mindful exercises where you can recognize that I am having this thought, but I am not this thought. And when I can separate myself from my thought, then I can replace that thought with a very positive, affirmative thought, and I can focus on that positive so that that becomes better, bigger and better, and the previous negative thought becomes obsolete and just disappears.
Got it.
That's the only way, there's no other way.
Okay. One more thing I'd love to ask you is, when you said trauma, that when as people who are growing up, we see something that we can't handle or something that was very overwhelming in that moment. Apart from a negative belief, does that also, is that kind of trauma also leaving any emotional wounds in us?
Absolutely. So when you understand the whole phenomena of emotional wounds, it's important we recognize, and as we are growing up and we're dealing with life and we're going through traumatic experiences which are very difficult for us to cope up with at that moment, the energy goes unprocessed and it leaves certain scars in our emotional body that become our negative pain, our negative belief, or the root cause for our suffering. And they manifest as emotional wounds and psychological wounds. Psychology is a study of our mind, right? So then they end up manifesting as our negative self-beliefs, negative self-doubts, where we lose faith in ourselves, we stop loving ourselves, we stop trusting life, and it's a consistent loop. So yes, our emotional wounds and our psychological wounds happen very early in our childhood, and they need to be healed. They don't get healed on their own. They need some intervention. They need some kind of a roadmap where you go within and you address those wounds and heal them with a new perspective, in a higher perspective.
Got it. So now for any parent listening to this, right, like they can immediately get very anxious. Okay, now what, what to do about my child who's growing up, right? Like, what is a traumatic experience, and how can I make sure that they don't have very scarring emotional wounds, right? Nobody wants their child to grow up underconfident or fearful about money or fearful about relationships. So how can people proactively, or even why did we have any emotional wounds for that matter, like flip side of the same question?
So it's really important to recognize that while a child is developing, it takes 21 years for a complete the human brain to fully develop, and 0 to 7 years we don't even have a logical brain, right? 0 to 7 years, and a child is only learning through observation. So a child cannot logically process good, bad, right, wrong.
Right.
For example, if the child is just screaming at the mother, the child logically cannot process, why is my mother screaming at me? The child simply believes, oh, I'm not good enough, and that's why my mother is screaming at me. And now that manifests as trauma because it's too much for a child to handle and process, and that leaves a scar or a belief, and the child starts believing, maybe I'm not good enough and maybe I just deserve abuse or screaming from my mom. So it's very important for us to recognize children learn through observation only, right? Not through lectures, not through anything else. And when the environment is unsafe, with some kind of conflicts, some kind of criticism, or maybe belittling the child, or maybe some sibling rivalry, all of these are leading to a lot of unprocessed trauma, and these then in turn become our negative beliefs, our negative thoughts, and that sticky energy that we carry along all our life that we are trying to fight. Like they show up like our inner demons, right? So the first thing is a safe environment, a safe emotional environment. Like I said, we have an emotional body and a physical body, and our physical survival needs are roti, kapda or makan.
Right.
Right? We also have emotional survival needs, and they are the nurturance, the touch, the love and the belongingness of the biological mother and the father.
What is the nurturance like, I mean?
Nurturance is an embodied practice which includes a feeling of love and compassion and touch. Put together is where nurturance comes in. And when these emotional survival needs are unmet by our caregivers, they manifest as these emotional or psychological wounds because they don't give our emotional body a safe environment to grow up, right? So it's really important to recognize that a safe environment is what's really, really important. Even the new study of epigenetics states that it is not the genes that decide the fate and the destiny of our emotions and our psychology or biology. It is our environmental conditioning, right? And our brain is designed for self-preservation. Every time there is something unsafe in our environment, our brain goes into a fight and flight mode, and it switches off the intelligent cognitive mode, and the chemicals that are produced are very aggressive, like as if we are in danger and there's a tiger running behind us, Providing a safe environment actually keeps our cognitive mode on, and the chemicals that are flowing then give us a completely healthy psychological, emotional, and physical development.
Got it.
So the answer to this is the environment has to be emotionally safe for a child to become mentally, emotionally, and psychologically healthy.